throughout the supply chain. So
Oh, we
that's
forgot
what we're doing
to-
right now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Mary Gordon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary, and I'm from California as well, so it's early for me. I am an English language teacher. I've been doing that for about 8 years. And I have recently gotten more information about investing and about starting a business of my own. So I was just very curious to speak with everyone today and learn more. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Abby. Oh, we only have one Abby today. Wow.
Oh, Miss Abby Sugar. Hopefully she'll be back soon.
Oh, the other Abby signed up. She might be having technical. She might have lost power. So.
Oh gosh, I hope
She's always here.
I hope she's okay. I'm Abby Ludowise, not Abby Sugar, but I am working on a home hygiene brand that we're almost done formulating. We have a really cool formulation that includes NASA grown botanicals. They're hydroponically grown with a lot of really cool properties. The formulas are safe. They don't include a lot of the really harsh stuff, high performance, and also with a really cool luxury element, anti-aging, nice for your skin, that sort of thing. So we're kind of taking home self-care to a new level with sustainable packaging as well. We're using a sugar cane plastic on the refillables and glass bottles. So we're kind of, you know, it's a trend that's happening across the board. We're just not seeing it happening in a luxury level to the same way that we are with other CPGs. So it's been an enjoyable experience to create.
Oh, thank you. Adrian Stern.
Yes, hello, good morning, everyone. Always a pleasure to hop on these breakfast calls. It's been a minute. I'm Adrian. I'm the co-founder of a company called Reveal. We are building a platform to automate paperwork for creators. And we recently, well, a couple weeks ago, launched our open beta. Have been seeing really nice growth, like over 50% week over week, which we're very excited about. Yeah, I was looking forward to hearing, hearing Maria speak. I saw that you have some experience in the entertainment industry as well, so always eager to hear investors who have that type of background.
Well, we want to hear about you. I have entertainment experience back. We should talk, Mariah. Andrea. Oh, you're muted. Oh. Okay, so we'll move on to Catherine, who's also muted, so you'll have to unmute yourself, Catherine. There you are.
Yep. Hi, I'm Catherine Dale, and I am located in New York City. I am a naturopathic doctor, and I've been in practice mostly on my own for the last 20 years. I practice online predominantly now. My interest is to get involved in venture capital, particularly with women in Pakistan is where I really would like to end up eventually. And my hope is to improve the political situation for women through economic improvement and support. So I'm interested to hear more about what Mariah is up to and what other people are up to, and just sort of learning more about what my options are and what's available. Thank you.
Oh, I should put you in touch with my friend who's had a long career in Mercy Corps.
Thank you.
Sure. Siri.
Hi, I'm Sari. I'm a co-founder as well as the Chief Technology Operations Officer at the Brooklyn-based company Juice. We are connecting the well-being marketplace to users based on their individual health needs. We have a beta out, which is actually doing really well. We are building out our B2B side and actively fundraising our pre-seed round, and we've met 30% of our fundraising goals so far. So we are looking for investors interested in minority founders like me and my co-founder, and are looking to really help us grow over the next few months.
Oh, thank you. Monif, and welcome back. I know you're driving. Are you able to introduce yourself? You're muted. I know he's in the car right now, so maybe he's in a dead zone or something.
Hello.
There he is.
Hi, thank you, Bonnie. It's good to see everybody. I'm Munif, and I'm the now co-founder of Integra Pitch. We are a platform that creates coins and economies around inventions. We allow inventors to raise funds and get development for the benefit of the coin and the supporters and coin holders. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think that's it. Did we get everybody? Did I miss anybody? Oh, Robin, I'm sorry, because you went out and then you came back.
I did. My apologies. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
My name is Robin Leary, and I am a scientist by training. I've worked for the past 7+ years in the biotech industry in very small startups, and I'm a woman in science. I've had many experiences that I think other women don't need to have in our era. And I would love to someday have my own venture capital fund that I could invest in female founders, as well as other people who have untraditional backgrounds who want to make it in science and begin their own startups. Because I really think that that would be something that would foster better innovation in my industry. So life science expert here.
What kind of science, just specifically?
I did a postdoc in chemistry, but the majority of my training has been in genetic engineering, or what we refer to as synthetic biology. And so I primarily work on drug development, so in oncology, but I've also worked on medical devices, or well, now I am an angel investor with Tech Coast Angels. So we deal with all different types of innovations in healthcare. So my experience in investing goes outside of what I do in the lab, or what I did years ago in the lab. Now I just manage things.
Oh, thank you. So Andrew, do you have, I don't know if you're able to, if you have low bandwidth right now, but we will give you the opportunity to introduce yourself if you'd like. I was having technical difficulty. Anyway, so we open it up to Q&A now. So questions, and Mariah is there. She's just tending to a fussy cat. I have one of those too.
The cat is happily lapping away at her fresh water, and I am lapping away at my coffee. So my voice is still raspy, but I am, I'm here and I'm ready. So I hear that there's a diverse representation from people who want to go into funds, people who have startup backgrounds, early stage founders. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions and just really make this a breakfast conversation.
Yeah, what made you get into investing?
Oh boy. Okay, so that is a story. I'll try to give you the cliff notes on it. Essentially, I'm an impact-oriented person. If you're into Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFJ. We're like the rarest personality. I'm a type 1 on the Enneagram, which is the reformer with a caregiver wing. So, I care about humanity. I care about impact. I was very much an activist as an undergrad at UC Berkeley before there were hashtags or Twitter or Facebook. So I'm kind of, dating myself. But what was also happening during that time at Cal, which is known for, civil rights, women's rights, they could be, anti-war, freedom of speech movement, all of those things. That was the history of the environment that I was in. We also had this .com boom happening. We had Silicon Valley, burgeoning into something new from what it evolved from in the World War II era, where, government funding into war technologies, brought on this, microwave alley that then turned into Silicon Valley. And so there was a lot happening there that I was kind of in the middle of. And what really interested me was, I'm over here learning about social justice issues and history. And, I'm a mixed person, multi-ethnic. And I was, studying ethnic studies and African studies, trying to really understand, why are there all these weird, cultural, racial issues in this country? And I found that a lot of the drivers and a lot of, what was perpetuating social disparity and division was economic. And so, when I saw this, rise of this, technology sector where there's all this money changing hands, and all this entrepreneurship bustling. I was also introduced to Robert Kiyosaki's work, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Cash Flow Quadrant, by a friend of mine who was then at what was Solomon Smith Barney, studying to become a stockbroker, and he just happened to be from Ghana. I was also getting to know and work with my now husband, who's this picture here, who's from Botswana and was here on scholarship for motion picture production. So, I was looking at motion pictures and all of that technology and the storytelling and the business model, and how that informs how we perceive each other, how culture and propaganda is disseminated, and all the, the capital formation and technology that goes into that, and how that related to my major and thesis around representations of people of color. And I'm seeing Napster over here disrupting the music industry, and I'm thinking, we're laying fiber optics for bandwidth, we're converting to digital, production and distribution. I want to be at the forefront of that, because I believe that technology is also going to disrupt the motion picture industry, and that will afford opportunities for what I then called substreams of distribution that people could have more ownership and control off of. Because you can see historically, people of color have been in the entertainment industry, but we've not had ownership of our cultural products. So when you see what gets played on Clear Channel, it's not necessarily reflective of our cultures, but it definitely influences our culture and how we're perceived and represented in the world. So that's kind of like the impetus. And so I ended up going to USC for motion picture producing, which is the business side of filmmaking. Knew I wanted to get into capital formation and distribution. So I wanted to do film funds, produce movies, etc. And while I was in my second year, I transferred from USC to UCLA. And, a little background, personal background, I emancipated from foster care at 17. My mother was disabled, former director of nursing. My father's paraplegic, former veteran. So, I was bootstrapping my way through college. I started my first company, a startup, in 2001 as an undergrad. But when I moved to LA, I wasn't able to continue that business, which was a boutique production firm and an e-commerce site. So I ended up getting a job in the finance industry, becoming FINRA licensed. So I had to read the securities laws. And I recognize, this is pre-Jobs Act, that, capital formation regulations were exclusive of people like me who did not come from high net worth backgrounds. And so, I kind of felt like I'd been sold a bad bill of goods, because I probably wouldn't have gone to grad school, and taken the route that I had I known those laws and regulations. But, I ended up leaving LA, going, being in the financial industry before the crash. But by 2012, when things were starting to recover, the Jobs Act came out, and that kind of opened up capital formation a little bit. Some of the rules where you could raise beyond your network through general solicitation, but there were still, that some blocks and barriers there in terms of the accredited investor definition, et cetera. But I felt like it was a good time to take to market a startup, which, CineShares, around opening up, again, access to capital formation, compliant capital formation, because a lot of filmmakers are out there raising money out of compliance. And I'm sure this happens in New York as well. And a lot of those deals were coming across my desk, some that were, box office hits, but then were later like implicated in money laundering and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, thank God I didn't get in that. But I went into market with CineShares and started seeing that a lot of the things that existed 20 years ago in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion had not changed at all, was very toxic. I didn't know at the time, but only 13 Black women had raised over $1 million in capital, in 2016. So I got in around 2012 Jobs Act came out. By 2013, my mom passed. 2014, I'm launching a startup. 2015, I become a Kauffman Fellow, which is a venture capital track trying to get into venture capital. And by 2016, Catherine Finney comes out with Project Diane, and Richard Kirby, who was VP of Venrock at the time, came out with Who is a VC. And I realized, without having a high net worth network, I'm still spinning my wheels, trying to raise money on Sand Hill Road, particularly without being able to raise significant capital from friends and family. So if I'm going to put in that much effort, I might as well do it over here on the VC side, because we are not getting funded equitably. And there's all of these problems in our industry. So long story short, that's, I'd already ideated on Diversity Ventures when I applied for the Kauffman Fellows Society in 2015, but I fast tracked that because I felt like that was a way where I could have more impact and I would be more successful than trying to build out a startup as a Black woman in the, environment that we were in. So that's the long and short of it, essentially. You're muted, Bonnie.
I'm muted. Anybody have any questions? I don't
Yeah,
always question. I do trip it.
Yeah, I have a question. I guess when you look at it from the point of view of diversity, what would you talk to the diversity entrepreneur about investing, finding investors? Because it seems like that's one of the areas Bonnie and I always get asked in their meetings. How do we find our investors? What do we need to do? And it's primarily a lot of the people in our room are diverse. So it's how do you help that startup? What do they need to know to be better at getting funding?
Well, thanks for that question, Trip. One of the things that I'll start off by saying, and this is one of the things that we say at Diversity Ventures, diversity includes you. So everybody in this room is diverse. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, orange, green. Everyone is diverse. Diversity is a function of context, right? Like, so if you've got a room full of black men at a table, they're not a monolith. Obviously, there may be diversity in that room, but it's going to be more diverse when you step in it, Trip, right? And when Robin steps in it, and when Siri steps in it, or when I step in it, those all bring layers of diversity. So diversity includes you. In terms of underrepresented founders, which is what I really think we mean when we're talking about diverse founders. We're talking about founders that aren't equitably represented, who have not had equitable opportunity, who have been historically excluded and oppressed. I would, again, reference, and I'll put here in the chat, my contact information, but I would say, start with that website there, Tech Funding Equity. So for context, I mentioned that, I think I mentioned in the intro that I spent Q1 as a Aspen Tech Policy Hub Fellow. And we all of the fellows came out of the hub with a project, a policy problem that we're aiming to solve. And mine was, how might we close the funding gap for underrepresented founders, specifically women and underrepresented people of color, Black and Latinx specifically. Although there's, other folks who fit in that as well. And so I think the first thing that you need to do is understand the landscape, which is something, like I said, I didn't recognize the landscape. Even though I have this, ethnic studies background, I assumed the best. I often say, I thought my mom's generation burnt her bra, and Martin Luther King and them, died for me not to have to fight some of these battles that I fight. And I always knew that there was going to be the people who shouted the racial slurs out the window, and I was going to have these experiences, but I didn't understand the systemic nature of some of these barriers to entry that were still out there, still impacting us. There was a learning curve to that. And so if you don't understand the landscape that you're in, you're already at a disadvantage. Right. But then you don't want to get stuck in the limiting mindset because of that. Right. Like, so, one of the statistics, for example, a few years ago, LinkedIn did a study, and 40% of the VCs interviewed said they felt the diversity was talked about too much in the news. So when you go into a room, whether or not you're talking about diversity, just being a woman, being a person of color, in the back of their mind, they're already bringing bias to the table that you may be oblivious to. So you have to understand that landscape. And I think we would say to any founder, when you're going to raise capital, target who you're going to. So we're in a fortunate time that post George Floyd, people are more vocal about wanting to tap into a pipeline, about recognizing that there's not a shortage of, underrepresented founders. There's really just, broken networks or limited networks, right? And so, there are people who are very vocal about wanting to do better, and there's people who are very vocal and overtly seeking underrepresented founders. So start there. I would say just start there. Just do a Google search, make sure you're talking to people in the right stage. And, I'll just throw out a couple of names, like Black Star Fund. We have the Black Fund here in Sacramento. Like I said, Diversity Ventures is gender and ethnic agnostic, but we want to see inclusive teams. There's Mac Capital out of LA. There's Backstage Capital with Arlen Hamilton. There's Precursor with Charles Hudson. You can go on Signal, you can go on Crunchbase, you can just do a Google search around the topic of diversity and venture capital, and you're going to get all kinds of articles. They're going to list names of venture capitalists who are doing the work. And then there's the, the big players who are trying to do better, right? And they have these scout programs and stuff. And so you can, tap into the scouts, and they can be an entryway into the partners who have funding decisions. So that's just kind of like, foundational best practices to just get started. And I would have a really good CRM to keep track of who you're talking to. And the other thing I would just say, it's a best practice for everyone. Communicate, be pleasantly persistent, put people on updates that they've opted into, deliver updates, and let people know that you're making progress, because when you're super duper early, especially when you don't have access to friends and family to kind of validate that, like, we believe in putting our capital at risk in this founder, and we've known them since they were knee-high to a grasshopper, we need to get to know you and de-risk, the founder risk, and know that you can execute and overcome adversity, and that you're going to stick with it and not give up. So I hope that's helpful in addressing that question, Trip.
You're muted, Trip.
It brings up a second question. In one way, one of the things I'm seeing, I'm an enterprise guy. I've run billion-dollar companies in my past. Part of that diversity supply chain is, one of the things is they get that big customer and they fail. The company fails because they don't have the right business structure in place to support an enterprise client. And that part of it's financial, right? If you go to work and you have a diversity company and you're working with Walmart, your biggest fear should be you're going to go out of business because you don't have anybody else but Walmart. How do you help educate the entrepreneur to how to handle their client portfolio so they can have bigger customers and become sustainable? Because that's where I'm kind of spending a lot of my time in my life, is my clients are saying, help us build more sustainable supply chains. There's a lot of risk involved if they go out of business. It's disruptive in the fact that cybersecurity is a big issue. A lot of the issues, how do you educate larger communities? Are there groups you would recommend me going in and talking to, partnering with, to help educate the entrepreneur about what it means to have an enterprise level client like a Procter & Gamble, a Walmart, IBM?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said a lot of it is financial. I mean, so much of being able to compete is the fact that, people of color are not equitably funded, even if they have equal credit scores. I mean, there are so many systemic barriers that are set up to give certain folks advantage over others. So in terms of, just advising founders in that regard, I don't specifically deal with enterprise. I would look at enterprise. The folks that I know that are addressing enterprise seem to be doing quite well, but, a lot of the people of color that you see making it that far, they're already exceptional in some way. They have some advantage. They've tapped into some privileged network, and they are an exception to the rule. But I would say, I would want to be able to say, hey, talk to my friend Trip over here, which is the beauty of these kind of events, right? And building out our networks. In terms of who you could tap into, I would say, I'll say a collection of channels that is very much underlooked by venture capital and the private sector in general is government. Government has historically been, one place where people of color can succeed, whether it's in the military or, just in the government proper, or government programs and government grants. So, I think, for example, of my friend Chris Horton, who's here in California, in NorCal, and runs the, part of the NorCal SBDC programs, and is the originator of the SBDC's inclusivity project. So that's theinclusivityproject.com. And they have a mission that is really targeted towards Black founders unapologetically. Like, we want to get $100 million into Black founders specifically. So they have quite a pipeline. And because they're SBDC, they deal with more traditional, and by that I mean like companies that would, have revenue and be seeking loans. That's what they primarily deal with. They do also deal with tech. I think you'll find, probably more the type of founder that you're targeting there. And that could probably open up doors to other SBDCs, that are state by state. It's a state funded program. It's federally and state. It's federally funded, but state run. And so I think that that's a good place to tap into really diverse founders that may not be specifically in tech-enabled scalable venture, but certainly a more diverse pipeline than what you would traditionally find in like Silicon Valley, New York tech scene.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, Robin, I know you've been waiting patiently.
Oh, yeah, I guess this kind of links to that question. And that is, if you know individuals that are developing products that go for an audience that might be underrepresented. For example, I know someone seeking funding and they're making a product that is going to be developed in the autistic population, as well as for people with ADHD and elderly. And so their approach was actually to make it more for the general public as opposed to specialize it when they had challenges getting funded. But what do you do if you want to develop something for maybe a community that's not traditionally represented, where people are like actively trying to market towards?
So first of all, Robin, I just want to say you're a baddie, and I definitely want to keep in touch with you. I love that you're a woman in science. I'm going to be doing some work with the NSF, and had a great call yesterday with Lydia McClure, who you might want to get to know if you don't already. And they're really, the work that she's doing, I think it's called Research Bridge Partners. They're really trying to open up funding to the sciences beyond Silicon Valley. I know Reid Hoffman is their chair. So just want to throw that out there and, shout you out and hurrah. So in regard to what you're saying, I'll just, when you're dealing with venture capital, and this is tough for the sciences as well. Oftentimes when I look at things that are coming out of, like, say, UC Berkeley, UC Davis, or like CalSEED, I sit on the tech advisory committee for the Clean Energy Fund's CalSEED program, and we're dealing with like hardcore science stuff or biotech stuff. It gets very academic, and you see founders spend a lot of time on like the problem and solution, and they really don't spend a lot of time on, unit economics, the market, the things that VCs need to know. I call it my formula. Like, I need to know, like, how big is your market? What is your revenue model, or how you're going to monetize? What's your go-to-market? Do you have traction? And I want to be able to go into my cell phone and pull out the calculator and figure out how much money you can make as a function of, an investment. Like, what are you raising? How much runway is that going to get you? What's your use of funds? And I want to be able to go there and say, oh, you're putting, this percentage into marketing, and based on the channels you have and your customer acquisition costs and your estimated, lifetime value of that customer, this is how much money you're going to make in 5 years. And can you be a $1 billion company and make returns to my portfolio? So the story is just a short part of it. Your problem solution, if the business model justifies a deeper dive, then I will go in and learn more about your business model, right? So to your point, the challenge is, do you have the market size to sustain, a venture backable business, right? Or to be a venture backable business? Or is this something that you should just be raising, was it SBIR or SBI NIH, grant funding for? So to the, more specifically, when you talk about like autism, ADHD, the elderly, maybe that's a beachhead, right? Maybe that's the obtainable market. So when it comes to, market sizing, we typically look at the total addressable market, the serviceable addressable market, and then the serviceable obtainable market. I like to see people start from the obtainable market, which is typically your beachhead. So if you develop a product that is specific to autism, ADHD or ADD, or other, other services for people who are not neurotypical. And I'm assuming, like, maybe when you're talking about the elderly, maybe you're talking about dementia or other things like that. Maybe that's your beachhead, your obtainable market. Or maybe that's, you start with autism and then you go into, the elderly, which is probably a larger population. I kind of like to see numbers instead of, dollar signs in terms of market, although, you can always put off to the side, some translation of like, this is how much is this market is. And we want to see that be like in the billions, preferably, honestly, I'm generalizing here. But more importantly, I want to see, okay, given your revenue model and the size of the market, can you become a $1 billion company, or, something within the realm of like, it's going to be worth it for me to invest. And so if that technology that has that serviceable, obtainable market identified and some traction in there can then grow into a larger market, then you want to tell that story. And so I hope that answers your question.
It definitely does. Thank you. And I would love to connect later. Happy to help out in any way. I saw your paper advisors on your website, so I would definitely volunteer for that.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
I really want to thank you for saying that, because I work directly with founders, and I help them with their pitch decks and do this, make introductions to investors. And they're always talking, their decks are usually marketing decks or product decks. And I keep telling them, VCs, it's a business. It's not your piggy bank. It's all about the economics. So thank you for spelling that out. Thank you. Thank you. Adrian.
Yeah, that was super insightful. I'd like to piggyback on something you said earlier, Mariah, which was around the process of getting to know the founders and sort of de-risking that investment from a perspective of knowing that they can execute. What are some of the signals that you look for, and how do you go about identifying those?
Oh, excellent question. So, obviously, like domain expertise is one of the first things, right? Which most founders probably feel pretty confident about, right? They have some kind of insider domain expertise. A lot of it, especially at the early stage, is, like coachability, because you don't have to know it all. You're wearing so many hats. I mean, I think of Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg all the time. I mean, they were just young kids, but they were surrounded by mentors and advisors. And, honestly, I don't care if you're 18 or, 45, like, I really don't care. If you're surrounded by the right people and you're coachable, do you have that, mindset that can take information, rapidly apply it and turn around? And so, part of the way that you recognize that is, like, say I have a call with the founder and, their market slide is all jacked up, and you can't look at it and see it's a market slide, and there's like it requires more cognitive load to even recognize that it's a market slide, because it's not like the typical market slide. And I say, okay, this is how this is going to resonate in terms of persuasiveness when you're dealing with VCs. You're causing this cognitive load, and here's how you could better do it, or here's how you could better reflect your market. And they say, got it, okay. And they turn around and they change it and they send me an updated deck to show that they have processed that and that they're delivering on it, right? That's a sign, right? And if I make intros or something to potential clients or whatever, and they're following through on those, and I get feedback from those intros, like, oh, wow, this was a great intro. Thank you. This is, we're going to work with this company or something. Here's another thing. If you have a problem, whether it's like, we're looking to fill this particular role, or, whatever the case may be, being able to articulate that you have a problem so that, advisors can help. Having activated advisors, if I'm saying, oh, okay, here's your advisors, what exactly are they doing? And you're able to say, okay, this person has been helping with this, and they're not just names on a deck. All those these are just, random examples that I'm throwing out there of indicators that that how to effectively leverage your team, that you can grow a team, attract a team, and more than anything, I would say communication, because as a venture capitalist, I have a responsibility and a fiduciary duty to my investors and have to report to them quarterly. And if I'm having to chase someone down to get updates, that's a problem. So when you're very communicative and you're following up, you're letting me know what's happening. I only have 24 hours in a day. I deal with a lot of founders. So, I might not be immediately responsive, but the fact that you're still updating me, or you're texting me and letting me know there's something important in my email box, that develops a trust and a relationship, because when you invest in a company, it's a long-term relationship. Absolutely. And so just think of any long-term relationship you have in your life, whether it's a spouse or, a loved one, a family member, you're going to expect a certain level of communication for that relationship to be close and to have trust. So those are just some things that can help us get to know founders. And the more you communicate, the more rapidly you can get to know someone, right? Like if you're dating someone who lives next door, you're in college together and you're seeing each other every day, you're going to get to know each other, faster and better, and you may develop a rapid bond. Whereas if you're having a long distance relationship, it might take years, right? So, that's just a little bit of, a few thoughts on how you can, demonstrate your ability to execute and develop a relationship. I think of a blog, and I'll just throw this out here because it's a great resource. Mark Suster is like a legend in the game. He's at Upfront Ventures in LA, and he has a rich repository on both sides of the table. That's his blog. And there's a particular blog post that's called Lines, Not Dots. And I think it really articulates the point, like one data point of, one phone call, one meeting, one outreach, one pitch deck or whatever, that's a dot. Mm-hmm. But over time, we can really see, even if you go down, but then you rebound, that's fine. Show us over time how you're going up.
Right. That's awesome. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Siri has a question as well.
Thank you for your response, Mariah, because I think, you know, some of this has exactly what Adrian said is kind of what my question was on. But, you know, I've been in environments with VCs where, you know, my gender, our age, you know, our ethnicity have been seen as risk factors. My co-founder is a physician, and I'm an engineer. And it seems like those aspects are actually disqualifiers in some situations because of these other aspects of us. So I'm kind of wondering like how we can continue to de-risk some of these situations and be convincing that, okay, we have a beta, we have some traction, we aren't generating revenue yet, but we have strong partnerships and other evidence that we are moving and growing and able to, you know, execute on our plans. So I'm just wondering kind of what the approach should be there and how we can continue to kind of convince folks that these qualities about us like aren't risk factors.
Thank you for that question, Siri. And thank you, Catherine, for putting that link to Lines Not Dots in the chat. I want to see if I can find this this video by Ava DuVernay. She spoke at this event that event from an organization that I used to be a part of called Film Independent, and she describes her early career transitioning from PR to filmmaking, and there's so many parallels to like the mindset that a lot of founders have when they're addressing VC. So, you know, when you were describing, you know, your experience and posing the question, it just brought up all of these, you know, like thoughts and reminders that, you know, I'm trying to, you know, like sum into a way to really address what you're saying. So I think the first thing that comes up is like, I'm a part of FourthWave Female Founder Accelerator. I'm a board member. And so as you mentioned, as women, you know, the facts are what they are in terms of how much funding comes to us, et cetera, et cetera. So part of the work that we do is around like quantum physics and manifestation and conscious leadership. And there's an exercise that we do when we go through these mindset exercises where, you know, there's like these optical illusions, like is the dress yellow or is it blue? You know, and you know, it's like a matter of perspective, right? You know, is this Beyonce or Ben Stiller? And it depends on, you know, where you're looking at it from, right? So I think part of it is recognizing that, you know, we do have diverse perspectives, right? And that, you know, as humans, we bring our lived experiences, our emotions, et cetera, into it. So part of the exercise we do there is this like visualization of, you know, a body of water that ranges from cold to hot. And every possibility of temperature exists within that framework. But, you know, we do this exercise where we imagine someone. Last year, for me, it was Donald Trump, like someone that just makes your blood kind of boil a little bit. And then, you know, you close your eyes and you imagine putting a drop in the bucket. Like you look into this body of water and you see that person and you put a drop in the bucket of someone who like counters that. So for me, it was Nelson Mandela. And immediately when I visualized Nelson Mandela, all of that kind of like toxic, you know, vibe that I got when I think about like Donald Trump just dissipated into like this warm, inspiring, you know, despite all the vicissitudes that Nelson Mandela faced, I wasn't thinking about like the horrors of Robben Island. I was thinking of like what an amazing, inspiring person and legacy that he has that still resonates, right? And so when you're dealing with an environment that is so toxic to people of color and has this history of exclusion of, you know, women, et cetera, it's really important to put that drop in the bucket so that you're going in with the right mindset and with the right confidence to manifest a change, right? Because so much of what we do is like the energy that we put into the world. So much of what exists in the world is the energy we put out. So like even part of that exercise, we talk about like when monks go into a city and pray, it like literally changes the vibe that you can measure it, right? Like of the earth when different events happen, like 9/11, it changes the whole energy. And so, you know, you wanna feed your soul to be able to bring that energy into the room where people are just like, you disrupt their bias, right? By being magnetic and making them curious, making, you know, drawing them to you. So that's part of it. The other thing is like every founder has risk, every founder. 99.9% of what we see, we're going to say no, we're going to pass, we're going to say, oh, you're too early or whatever. I try to give the facts and tell people what I would have wanted to know. But you have to remember it's not just you. So we get hit with all of this stuff, again, all the statistics about how, our gender and our ethnicity and our backgrounds are going to make things harder for us. And we carry that in and think that's the reason when, it may be part of the reason, but it's hard for everybody already, period. And so if you come in with that confidence and you're explaining to them, why you're unique, why you're going to win, that's the important thing to remember. And this other added layer of adversity, it also brings strength. When you look at, the Kauffman Fellows research that says that, companies that have diverse leadership and have diverse executive teams outperform on realized exits. You got to go in the room knowing that you're bringing, maybe there's someone who's never seen someone like you. And it's a whole lot of cognitive dissonance for them. It's a whole lot of disrupting everything they've been programmed to believe. And if you come in with compassion for that person and recognize the value that you're bringing to them, especially in the era where like NASDAQ is like, you can't list if you don't have a diverse board and blah, 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 blah. And when people are waking up to say, oh, dang, I've been lying to myself or buying the lie that, this is a meritocracy, and you are coming with the solution to this problem that they're just realizing that they have, that can go a long way. And so again, I think it's a matter of like targeting the people who already get it, who've already been doing the work, and giving some of the laggards a chance to jump on the bandwagon. But just keep pushing and getting those deals, and be willing to kiss a lot of frogs, because any founder is going to have to pitch 100 folks to get one yes. The conversion rate is always going to be 1 to 2%, right? For anybody. And for you, that might be 500. But if you go that extra mile to do the 500, you're also going to have that, that high likelihood of outsized returns, because you're coming from a unique perspective, unique background, unique representation, right? So I would just look at it like that and just go in with massive confidence and put on your Sasha Fierce. So that goes back to this video. I'm going to try to pull it up. I'm going to go on mute and see if I can find it, of Ava DuVernay, when she talks about having a cloak of neediness, where she's trying to get all these coffees with people like, how do I break in? What do I do? Can you help me? Put me on. And then she just got this like epiphany, right? Where she's like, I am the bomb. Like, I got what I need. I'm just going to go. I don't care if I'm using an iPhone. I'm about to make this movie. And she ended up being, winning the audience award for, I think it's called Middle of Nowhere at Sundance. I'll tell you, it took me a while to get access to that movie. But when I watched it, it was like the characters just spoke to me. It was like, I've never seen, these weren't even, like big A-list actors, but I was like, oh my God, I feel this. This woman is masterful. And now she's doing Wrinkle in Time and, 13th. And when they see her, she's winning all these accolades. She's rocking the red carpet, and she just like, you know what I mean? Like, she just brings it. And like all of that cloak of neediness is gone. And she said, like, when she just released that and just recognized what she had and just walked in that and focused on producing by any means necessary, she just drew all of this power and resources to her. And so I would want to like pass that on to you and say, just walk in your Sasha Fierce, you know what I mean? And manifest despite that, because historically, come on, I'm a Black woman. My ancestors are survivors. I don't care how hood, ghetto, woo, woo, whoop you are. I'm like, I'm gonna put some respect on it, because we are survivors. Everything in this country has been designed to destroy us and dehumanize us. So if you're still here, you are freaking amazing. And look at how much we have contributed and achieved in this country despite, and if we weren't so amazing, people would not have to work so hard to put so many systemic barriers in place to destroy us. I mean, so when you look at the Simone Biles and you look at all these people that are out here skilling in every area, it's because we have this greatness. And so you just gotta like tap into that and allow yourself the healing to recalibrate from the consistent oppression that's, out there to try to stop us from being great. So it's a long-winded way, but I'm saying it all, but I hope that
Thank you
helps.
so much. Thank you.
We have some other people who got here late, and I'd like to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. Mahul, you have the stage. You're muted right now, but would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, how are you doing? My name is Mehul. I'm the founder of Diamond Hedge. It's the first augmented reality diamond price comparison company. We can try different diamond rings from anywhere in the world. We change the center stone, carat size, ring setting. We have over $5 billion worth of diamonds on our platform currently. We've been featured in Forbes, New York Times, Vogue, Glamour, a number of other publications. Right now, we're actually raising right now. So I wanted to ask you about the diversity aspect of it. Are there any funds that you recommend that we get in contact with, or anyone that in the luxury jewelry space that you might know of?
So first of all, I'll say, my husband's from Botswana and it's like the largest producer of diamonds. So
Yeah.
nice to hear. So it really depends on your business model. Like I wouldn't recommend, I dropped some names earlier of funds that are like, very explicit about being inclusive. But I couldn't like make any specific recommendations for your company without knowing a bit more about it, about the, the business model and everything. But I would say, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is like, if you do just a Google search on, venture capital diversity, you're going to get a ton of names. You're going to get articles, you're going to get partners' names, you're going to get, background information. And I would say, like, if you do that work and you do that research, and you get a sense of who these folks are and what they've invested in, then, you're better prepared when you reach out to, like one thing I just hate is number one, like I get all these emails where people are like, dear gentleman, or dear sir. I'm like, first off, I'm a woman. So like clearly you did no research on who you're reaching out to. This is just like a mass email essentially. So I'm not going to respond to that. Like, come on, I only have so many hours in the day. You're not the one. And then I have a pet peeve of people are like, oh, we're, closing our round and we have 30 days. I'm like, I am not going to get to know you in 30 days. Like, I'm not going to feel comfortable with that. Like I'm, part of my mandate is 75%. I want to lead, right? I want to set terms. I want to be the first one in. I want to, help you to be that, to be venture backable. I want to focus on the people who, need someone like me, not someone who's going to go out there and get it anyway. I want to see the overlooked stuff, whether it's like a scientist who just doesn't know how to translate into VC terminology, or someone who's been overlooked for other reasons. So like just do the work to know who the market is, and for you, if it's diversity, I don't know what your background is. If you want to start off targeting folks who invest in diverse teams, then do the research. I went to a research university, UC Berkeley, and like the big secret of research is Boolean. You know what I mean? Just put in the right search terms and do the work. You know what I mean? And you'll see who those people are. And subscribe on Twitter, follow them on LinkedIn. I kind of hate Twitter, but I love LinkedIn because it's very professional. And I know I'm not going to get down a rabbit hole of like trash, you know what I mean? Which happens sometimes in Twitter. Like, why am I debating with like, some, white nationalist here, but which is rare. But I'm just saying, LinkedIn is very professional. And when you're, plugged in there and you're connecting there, it also gives us a chance to see you and for you to be top of mind if you're posting stuff about your industry, about diamonds, about some stuff that's like just from the market in general, so that when we're looking at things from you, we're learning about your market, but also about what you're doing specifically, or thought pieces that you're doing. Then it's like, oh, we're going to be thinking of you and getting to know this industry, this market, and developing those lines, not dots, that I was talking about earlier. Though a lot of VCs spend way too much time on Twitter, and that's also another way to do that. So, those are just some thoughts on how you can identify and reach out.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Do you mind if I shoot over my deck over to you?
I put my link, my email, everything is in the, actually, you said you came in late, so I'll copy and paste it again.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mahul. Lydia. Are you still in North Carolina? Oh, Lydia. Oh, you're muted.
No, I'm back. It's the school year, so back to New Jersey. Hi, Mariah. Really enjoying it. I joined late, but I'm enjoying your insights. I work for a company called Diligent. We have an awesome product for investors. I may follow up this just to let you know what we have. If you take a look and think it could be helpful for your fund, let's connect. And then on the other side of things, I'm thinking of doing one of three things, and I'm just brainstorming with a lot of people around. And obviously these sessions are very conducive to that. So listening and getting all the tips. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you. And thank you, Adrian, for sharing your notes in the chat there.
Sure, my pleasure.
Claire. Oh, you're muted right now, Claire. If you'd like to introduce yourself. I guess not. Oh, so anybody else have a question? It's your forum here.
I have another
I can ask another question. Oh, sorry, Drake,
sure.
you can go ahead.
No, go ahead, Siri. Go ahead, please.
So one question that I did have is, let's say you've been interacting with a VC who initially says that you're a little too early, but to reach out. I know in some contexts, saying that you're early is just a nicer way of saying no, but you reach out and you're kind of updating them and creating this sense of FOMO. At what point should you not, like, at what point should you kind of say like, okay, like they're still saying this is too early and I like need to close my round, but they're still kind of like trying to get in, but are on the edge. So how do you kind of, one, get them to commit, and two, just like close your round anyway, because they're not?
That is such a tough question. And I don't think that there's a right answer. Part of what I would say is, you know, if they've requested to see your updates, then they're open, right? But it might not be for the first round. And I'll just say, like, you know, VCs are a lot like entrepreneurs, especially, you know, like I'm a founding partner, right? So, you know, we fundraise too. And then we have these deployment cycles. And then we also have oftentimes like investment committees, right? And, you know, they look at certain things around, you know, diligence and give a yay or nay about whether we can invest in a company. And then there's just a matter of like, how many companies can I really invest in according to my model per year? So it depends on like the size of the fund, how many investments they make it, you know, like at what check size, you know, are they taking board seats? There's so many layers of capacity. So that goes back to just like knowing who you're pitching. But if they're saying, you know, you put me on your updates, then there's some interest there that you're going to, you know, get from being too early to maybe something that they want in on. But there does have to be like an urgency. And a lot of times, you know, we've heard that urgency be like, oh, I'm closing at such and such a date. That works for some people. It doesn't work for others. If you have a lead investor that's setting the terms and maybe knows and can reach out to that person and say, hey, are you in or out? Then that might be some of that pressure, right? But you know, there's people who have said no to Uber. There's people who have said no to like amazing companies and or just failed to act because they're so unsure. And that goes back to why I really encourage people to have confidence and to really know the value that you bring into a room, because confidence is contagious. And if you're coming in and pitching and you're nervous and your voice is breaking, then I'm going to be nervous, you know, like this person is not ready, you know. But if you're like, yeah, you know, like this is half baked and this is woo, but I'm going to kill it. You know what I mean? That confidence alone will be like, oh yeah, you're going to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like it's the psychology of how humans act. So, you know, there's really, again, like not really a secret, but like, you know, Bonnie could probably speak to this and being in PR, there's like a certain je ne sais quoi around messaging of the persuasiveness, things that hit and like, understanding those triggers. And I think there's like books and stuff out there that can speak to that being persuasive. But, you know, I wouldn't try to create like some artificial, like, you know, thing. I would just be really pleasantly persistent and, you know, really know how to articulate again, like, you know, came up earlier, this is that we're trying to return our fund. We don't want to make an investment that's going to blow up in our faces, and we don't want to miss something that's going to be the next unicorn. So if you can convey to us how you are going to get this like huge revenue, or you have like, you know, interest from a client that's or a customer that is going to acquire you in a couple of years, or, you know, anything that can like really point to how you are going to help us return our fund, like think of us as your customer. Right? Like you have your target customer over here in your business model, but when you're raising money, you're selling investors on investing in you. So now we're your client in that context. And you have to really think about what what's in it for them. Not like, I need this, I need to close, I need money, I need to grow, but what does the investor need? You know what I mean? And the investor may need to go to LPs and say, we don't want to miss this, here's why. You know what I mean? And that's what you got to focus in on. So in terms of like, we've got to close this round, I'll say that here's another thing. A lot of times founders think that they need to raise capital and they don't. And they really are too early. And I'm just going to give an example of this that I don't think gets shared enough. One of my VC friends came and spoke on a panel I did, and he said, we're going to push you off a building and see if you can fly. You know what I mean? So if you can fly, great. If you can't fly, you're going splat. Right. And if you clean that mess up, they may invest in you again the next time, because now you've got experience. If you're messy and you lie and you hide and you don't tell us what's going on, then we're not going to mess with you again. Right. But, a lot of times people like to invest in young founders and early founders. It could be serial founders, because you're going to push you off the building, see if you go splat. If you do it well, we'll give you another shot. Right. But what that really translates to, and what I try to break that down, for founders to explain, is that if you're early and you don't have everything figured out, and you raise capital and then you hire all these people and you got all these operations and your model is broken and you have to pivot after you scaled, you might not be able to pivot, and you might find yourself in a position where the only thing that you can do is wind down, and that company is basically dead. Right. But if you're able to run these small tests when you're early and young, and then like maybe it takes you a little bit longer, which kind of goes against what some people proclaim, but most VCs, I mean, they're wrong the majority of the time. We're winning on 5-10% of deals, if that. Right. So, don't get so caught up in like, oh, dude, this is a hard and fast heuristic. It's not. It never is. Focus on getting your model right and knowing what your channels are that are repeatable, and then get the money in, right? And so a lot of times we think, well, I need money to hire, I need money to build a product. You probably don't. I mean, Airbnb sold Obama O's and Captain McCain Crunch to Bootstrap to get to a place where they could de-risk their model. And they did, without having to dilute, and then they had more leverage to negotiate. So, that's the other thing, like, really ask yourself if you need to raise capital, if there's any other way, like how long can you bootstrap? As painful and as uncomfortable as it is, how far can you bootstrap so that when you are raising capital, it really is fuel in a rocket ship that's built and ready to go? You know what I'm saying? And there's, another rocket ship, like in the works if this one crashes. Because look at Elon Musk, he's brilliant, but how many freaking rocket ships has he crashed, have blown up, right? How many satellites has he destroyed? I know he destroyed Facebook's satellite. And so then, to your last, your first point around being told that you're too early, I just want to unpack that for what it really means most of the time. I think the most common thing that it means is there's something in your presentation that tells me that you've not worked out the kinks. And that could be your confidence. It could be that, like, I'm just nervous because you're nervous. And that means you haven't gone and just pitched this enough and talked about it enough. You've not got into a mindset of like being unstoppable. It could be that. It could be that you have a market slide that's like all over the place. You're using a population number for your SOM and a dollar figure for your TAM. And I don't even know how to decipher that. Or you're pulling data from different sources that don't correlate in any kind of way to your business model. Like, you've not figured that out. It could be that you've not figured out your revenue model. And for some people, that's fine. That's like their superpower, is to help you figure out the revenue model. But for other people, like, you haven't figured that out, too early. For some people, it might be like your deck is just messy. Like, you've got a gazillion different words. I can't listen to you and read at the same time. So I'm doing neither well. And I'm like, well, if you haven't even got to a place where you can have a clean deck that like walks me through the top of the funnel in, kindergarten storybook level simplicity, you ain't ready. Like you've just not done the work. It could be your advisory team or your general team, and I'm nervous about your ability to execute based on that. It could be a million different things that just say that like there's more work to do for me to be confident that you're ready to take investment. But probably the number one thing is you don't have any assumptions that you can explain around what your cost of acquisition is, what the lifetime value is, what your economics are that show that there is a business model. Like most oftentimes founders have a problem and a solution, and they may not have even articulated that well. Like I said, with scientists, oftentimes they spend all of their presentation on that. And it's like, great, I know that you've spent the past 10 years figuring this out, but I only need like the 2-minute version of that. Actually, I need a 30-second version of that. And then I need to know how is this a business, right? And so like, if you're just spending a whole bunch of time telling me a story, that tells me that you're too early, you're not ready, because you don't get what's important to me. You know what I mean? And so like, I think that that's really what people mean when they say that you're too early, is that you've not come up with a compelling story to convince me that you have a VC backable business.
I think part of the problem is, if you don't mind my saying, is that, a lot of times investors will say, tell me a story. Well, yes, it's telling me a story, but it's not the story of your product and how it's the story of how you're going to build the business.
Yeah. And sometimes like, it's, and again, this is, it's, I'm spilling, heuristics here, right? And it's your brainchild at the end of the day, and you're going to get multiple conflicting opinions. And just like having, a human child, you're going to have to take what resonates for your child and apply that. And if you're wrong, then you can maybe pull from some of the other advice. You know what I mean? Like, okay, here's 10 different ways to treat a toothache. Well, this one sounds like right for my baby, right? But, oh, this didn't exactly work, so now I'm going to go to this. And that's some of that early tinkering, right? But for some people, the why is really big. And the why is big for me too. It can be very compelling. It could be the difference in whether or not I join an advisory board and help a company to become VC backable versus saying, put me on your updates list and let's see how you do. You know what I mean? So I'll give you an example. There was this founder, and he was out of Asia, and he had a smoking cessation technology. And so he's going through his deck and the spiel. His deck was clean, it was succinct, but there was just something like off in his presentation. It was just like kind of very robotic, right? And so at the end of the presentation, I was like, well, okay, but like, why are you doing this? Like, how do I know that you're really going to be successful in this? Like, there's so many things out there to help people quit smoking. And I was like, why you? Do you know someone who's had a challenge quitting smoking? Do you know someone who died of lung cancer? Or like, why are you even doing this? Right? It was just so bland in terms of, he had no passion, like in the way that he told the story. So when I asked him that question, and I said specifically, do you know someone who had a challenge quitting smoking, or someone who died of lung cancer or something? He turned into a whole nother founder. And he said, you know what? He was really like kind of stunned that I asked the question, and was taken aback. And he told me, I was very, very close with my grandfather. He was the most important person in the world to me. And he smoked like a pack and a half a day. And I watched him struggle for years. It makes me emotional just thinking about it. Just thinking about how transparent he was and what a different vibe and energy I got from him when he started telling this story. He said, I watched him struggle for years to try to quit smoking. And he just never could. And he died a very horrible, painful, prolonged death from failing time and time again to quit smoking. And when he told me that story, I said, this one ain't never going to give up. He's never going to give up. He's going to make this successful. Do you see what I'm saying? And so the story does matter, but it didn't have to be a 5-minute story. It didn't have to be a 10-minute story. He could tell me in 20 seconds why he was never going to give up and why this company meant the world to him. And I'm still emotionally moved just thinking about him telling the story, because I'm like back in the place of feeling him and feeling that confidence that, you know, but he had suppressed so much of that in his delivery, just going through the business model. So I don't want to say that the story doesn't matter, but again, it's the persuasiveness of how you tell it and how you weave it in. And there is a cohesion to how you tell it and how you deliver it. So know the 10 slides that matter, and then mold it to your company. Know the rules before you break the rules, kind of thing. But tell that story in a way that people are going to remember, and make it repeatable. Because if you tell me something like, especially this goes back to the sciences, it's multisyllabic and, you know, very, specific to your domain, even if I get it, I might not be able to repeat it. But if you break it down to like really layman's terms, just very general, and translate that for me and put it in a couple of words, in a, you know, like I say this with the byline, oftentimes people have, you know, the name of their company and then they'll have the byline. And if it's not something that, you know, is really reflective of the market that you're serving, or maybe it just reflects your SOM and doesn't reflect your TAM, or whatever the case may be, it's not going to be repeatable for me to convey to an investment partner or an LP or, you know, another decision maker why this is a compelling opportunity. So, you know, in everything that you do, just remember that, like, we're going to have to tell this story. We're going to be sharing it with our network. We're going to be going to bat for you. And if we can't even remember it or articulate it because it's not simple enough, then we're going to think you're too early.
Thank you.
Next one, Manif, did you have a question? You have raised your hand before.
I was actually clapping. I mean, that was very inspiring. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the way that the background and the unpacking, then coming back to the point, it's so inspiring the way Mariah is doing it. So thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
So anybody else have a question?
I have another question.
Okay.
I'd love to hear her thoughts on co-founders, because I've hearing from everybody in the room how they're founders and what they're going through. Mariah, I'm sure you have some stories that will help us better understand what we should look for our co-founder, because you've been at both sides, I'm sure.
Yeah, and this is a tough one. You know, I'll tell you one of the hardest things for me. I'll start with a kind of personal anecdote here. I'll give a couple of personal anecdotes. So on the founder side, when I first started incubating Cineshares, which is on the motion picture side of things, I was part of the Kaufman Fellows Academy, which is part of how I was discovered and was able to apply to the Kaufman Fellows Society and become a finalist. And I built a team that was mostly immigrants, people who are here as students, brilliant people. But it was a matter of like, if I don't get funding to sponsor these people, they cannot stay in this country and build this company. And so that's part of why, you know, you hear all, you know, so much out of Silicon Valley around, you know, immigration policy. And so I ended up losing team members just for the fact that I couldn't sponsor them to stay because I was having a hard time raising capital. And the reason I was having a hard time raising capital, one of the main reasons is because I don't come from a high net worth network. And even though, like, I went to USC, for example, it was my first private school I went to. I was one of, I think, 2 people who came from a public school. There might have been another, like one of the white guys, but they were like a white guy. So they kind of like fit in a little bit more than I did. I was like conspicuously standing out. And there was like a crew of people within my cohort, it was 20 of us, who were just hell bent on making us, particularly the women and women of color, like really hazing us and making us feel like we didn't belong, to the extent that, you know, the other young lady who happened to be Latina, who also went to my school, UC Berkeley, you know, she cried at one point. She just broke down crying. I was like, I ain't gonna let these busters see me cry. I'm from Oakland. But, you know, you know, she was crying because they were kind of bullying her. I had people slap my butt on set, you know, write racial slurs on slate boards that screened in class, make slavery jokes, accuse me of being emotional. I was like, no, I'm emphatic. I'm paying to be here just like you. And so what I recognized from that, and the whole point of me saying that, is that I had proximity to privilege, but I wasn't a beneficiary of the privilege. They were fine for me being the help and bringing the coffee and, you know, being the PA, but they weren't going to invite me to have, you know, lunch with the family in the Hamptons like they were with the other bros in the room, right? And so, you know, by just the nature of that, you know, I didn't have a bunch of people that made over $200,000 a year or had $1 million in net worth, excluding their private, their personal residence, et cetera. I wasn't able to raise that first tranche to get to a certain point or to, be able to even, sponsor these folks, let alone raise capital, particularly in a time, and this is like 2015, where diversity was a very toxic term. You throw it in a TechCrunch chat, any article on TechCrunch, 2014, 15, 16, you're going to have trolls for days, and so, in that environment, I just was not able to, leverage that team that I built. Then what I found was that the folks that were here, I'm competing with Google, Facebook, Twitter, all these folks who say that they want to increase diversity. And even though they have a revolving door, they also have golden handcuffs. So I'm competing with them for tech talent, right? And if I'm from a demographic that is the least likely to get funded, people are going to ask, okay, do I go over here and work where I can get some, shares, or do I go work for this woman who is probably unlikely to ever get funding in life? You know what I'm saying? And so with that said, I'm going to go back to Mark Suster on both sides of the table. In his early days, starting out up front, he was vocal about saying, I don't really need to see that you have a co-founder. You can hire a co-founder. Once I fund you, you can hire a co-founder. But he moved away from that. And part of the reason why he moved away from it was because the whole industry is saying, no, I want to see your co-founder. Your co-founder is your first sale. And if you can't convince someone else to join your team, you're not investment worthy. And that became a heuristic. I think it's a flawed heuristic, but it does have some legitimacy in that, 2014, I was in a car accident and that affected my capacity. And it happens. It may be rare, but people want to know, COVID era, what if you get COVID and end up in the hospital? Who's going to run your company, right? That's a real thing. So I would say that for some people, it's going to be required. But then if you look at for example, with Y Combinator, they've published a lot and they were very influential around the co-founder thing. And God forbid you disagree with Y Combinator, you are not getting invited to demo day. And that was a whole thing, right? But they were very influential back in this time. They still are, but even more so then. And they have one famous co-founder, the founder of, I think it's Dropbox, if I remember correctly. He was a solo founder when he got in. But, they published blogs basically saying we evaluated our portfolio and here's the ones that are solo founders and here's the ones that are not solo founders. Now that is not an apples to apples, analysis. And so it's really flawed logic, but because they're so influential, that has had influence in the industry. So, there are caveats and reasons why having a co-founder is helpful and important. But then there's also the fact that if you can, raise enough capital or be influential, enough to hire somebody, then, that's a way to go. And you just have to prove that you can build something, out without having that co-founder. I think people are more likely to invest in a technical solo founder because they can actually build a product. What I often see is a business founder or a visionary who will outsource. And then that can be, the danger there is it can just be a rabbit hole of just sinking money into a team that, you're not their only client. Their job is to get as much money out of you as possible. You have no control or autonomy over the product. You can't make changes. You don't know how to fix something that's broken. So that's a problem, right? So, I say all of this to kind of just give context to how we look at whether you're a solo founder or not. I'll give another example. I had a co-founder in DiverseCity Ventures early on. We worked together for a year. A little over a year. He had a legal background. He was from Hungary. He had some folks that were prospective LPs that he could never really close. But when he joined DiverseCity Ventures, because of the brand that I had built and the deal flow that I had built, I was able to close some of his LPs. When we got our first anchor LP, the mask came off. And all of a sudden, he's saying things like, I'm the only one who supports your stupid ideas. And I'm like, I don't even care that you think some of my ideas are stupid, but why weren't you telling me you thought it was stupid back then? Be honest with me, let's communicate. And, it just basically crumbled and he ended up running off with this money for this contract that we'd secured to bring a company here. And I was like, I am not even gonna waste time on the legal or whatever. And so I say all that to say, I mean, I had dinner at his house. We spent Sabbaths together. He'd stayed at my house. Like we knew each other's families. We spent a lot of time together, and I clearly did not fully know him. And so like sometimes over time, things are revealed, which goes back to the whole lines, not dots thing, right? And so like, having a vesting schedule where you have like a year-long cliff, and, then the ownership of the company is allocated over time. There's a law called the law of the architect. There's typically one visionary, right? And that visionary is the founder, right? And you could be an equal partner with your co-founder, but someone's kind of got to execute on the vision. So the visionary should really be focused on the direction that the company is going, what the strategy is going to be, doing the deep thinking, running point on like relationships and stuff like that. But even if they have an operational background, they shouldn't be in the weeds doing that. They should be building the business and coming up with the strategy and leaving it to, the co-founder to really execute. So that oftentimes is the technical co-founder building the product. And it can be very easy. Like I saw, a situation, and a friend called me this week, wanted me to help mediate with not something I'm invested in yet, at least, but he's worked with someone for decades, and now they're in an equal partnership, but this person's job is to edit and produce content. And this person, who's typically a writer, is operating in an executive producer capacity. And so because he's now the boss and the visionary, this person feels like the help. That's what he said. I feel like the help, because he's not recognizing the law of the architect, that you need to let this person be the visionary and come up with the strategy, and you need to execute it. He's putting in the money. He's put tens of thousands of dollars into it, and you're putting in sweat equity. And just like that friction around the role and the human part that's coming into it is where the problem is. So, these are the kind of things that really need to be factored in terms of, co-founder dynamics. If you're a solo founder, it eliminates some of those, co-founder problems that can arise. But, as investors, we want to know, are you aware of and addressing that? Do you know how to manage a cap table and a vesting schedule? And, just availing yourself of some research on those topics, I think will inform how you, approach that issue when you're dealing with investors. So I know we only have a couple minutes left, and so I hope it's been helpful.
Yes, this was fabulous. Does anybody have one last quick question?
Yeah, I guess it kind of adds on to that. And that's the concept of the solo capitalist. So that would be a person who has their business, but they're raising a VC fund, and they have to then, it sounds like to me, outsource all of these capabilities. And so you were mentioning the problem of over outsourcing all these functions. Like, how do people make that work? How is that seen in the VC world? And if you have a non-finance background, how do you even get started?
So you're asking more from like a VC side.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to put out there for you, Robin, if you're ready to get started on a venture fund, I would look into Transact Global.
Okay.
And I'm a member, and you and I can have an offline conversation about that. It's all female venture capitalists that are on fund 1, 2, or 3. So some have already gone out and raised, some are in the process. Ooh, frisky kitty. I just like ran laps around the living room. She never does that. But anyway, it is similar. And then a lot of LPs, particularly institutional LPs, will want to see partners, right? But that's really going to be required for an institutional grade fund, because there's just so much that goes into operations when you're taking institutional capital, and they have a different playbook because they're governed by their governance body. So when you're talking about pensions, endowments, institutional limited partners, they're typically more stringent. And so something that I would reference in that regard is the institutional limited partner associations ILPA due diligence checklist. For most emerging managers, which is what they use to describe people on funds 1 through 3, you're going to probably want to go to family offices first and high net worth individuals. And so if you're already angel and you have an angel network, you're probably going to, you're going to have to start there, and you're going to have to show a track record of investing other people's money. And there's kind of some strategies about going about that, because you can only have up to 99 investors in a fund that's over 10 million, or I think it's like 249 investors in a fund that's under 10 million, just because of the securities laws and exemptions to registration, which is a whole other story in and of itself. But if you have 249 slots and you're raising a fund of whatever size, whether it's 9 million, 5 million, you have to basically divide that fund size by that many slots, and that's going to tell you like your average check size. That's going to go up and down depending. Like if you get $1 million check over here, then you can take a bunch of $10,000 or $20,000 checks over here. But it's kind of like that kind of math, and that kind of determines how you go about fund one and get that track record that will open you up to be able to pitch the institutional investors. So there's a lot more that I could say about that, but you can be a solo GP, and even some institutional investors are willing to look at solo GPs now because of some thought leadership in the space. They still prefer partners. And I would just go back to what I was saying even about founders. Like you can be that architect and hire a partner, someone that complements your skill set or has an attributable track record, but you're going to obviously have to have the economics to, recruit them. Yeah. And probably like a brand that would attract them in the first place, right? There's some proprietary deal flow or something like that that would make them want to come and join your firm.
Awesome. This is so helpful. Thank you.
I want to thank you so much, Mariah. And I want to remind everybody that Jeff Bezos was a solo founder. It can be done, and you can reach unicorn status or even be wealthiest person in the world. So thank you so much for waking up, rallying early, and speaking at our breakfast. And I guess hopefully see you Wednesday at the Fuse. And thank you everybody for participating. And I'm wishing you all a wonderful holiday weekend. And thank you for attending and for participating, as I said. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel free to reach out and keep in touch.
Yes. Bye, everybody.